Okay, I just uploaded a video on how to get in between clubs. And so basically I said, well, if you got a 7-iron and you need it to be more like a soft 7-iron, you'd get in your typical stance, and instead of coming in for your 7, and there's my 7, I said, go ahead and get in that stance, and then take your foot, and if you don't want it to go quite as far as your 7, move your foot 1 foot in. Don't change any of the other setup. So you're still set up exactly the same, but instead of being here, stay exactly the same, move 1 foot in. Then when you come through, it's going to be a little higher because you don't have the room or the low point further. And then I said go the other direction for the other way. If you need to stretch out that 7, get in your typical stance and move it forward a little bit, that'll make you come around more. So that was the last video. So this one I want to finish on how we're dumping angles. So that's one way to change your loft a little bit. The other way to change your loft, I said, is to try to hold more loft as you're coming in with that release. And since as you're coming down as you're releasing, you can change your loft by trying to hold it. The problem I have with holding the loft is I already want you to have this cocked as much as possible. So to cock it even more kind of doesn't make sense. So that's why moving the low point or getting forward on the ball, the further you go past the ball before you hit, the lower it's going to be. So unless you want to really get that elbow in and try to drive down on that ball to get it down, and then if you don't, if you miss, you're actually going to be adding loft. So yes, theoretically, when you come up and you set this elbow here, if you were to hold it, and remember we're making a turn and then turning the whole entire body, you could get more side lean and present almost a flat club and completely de-loft it. So that is a possibility to get it down there. And that went like maybe a 3.5 iron. And if you can still release doing something like that so that you can feel comfortable, you might hit fat. It would take some practice. I try to tell people, take the club you need, then add half a club or take off half a club. But once you get into this kind of stuff, see, that went more like a 7.5 iron because by the time I came around on it, I needed to be further down. So it's just dangerous. You can get it. You can practice this stuff, but I don't want to see it where you finally get to the point where you're dragging the handle. On a wedge, I tell people the more that of the shaft that goes past the ball before they hit the ball, chances are the lower the trajectory, because now you got your hands far enough down. There is a second way of doing this. Well, there's many ways, I've said that. But instead of playing the center part of your body coming up and down, or playing the right side of your body coming up and down, what happens if I were to try to keep the club so my hand, instead of being over the sternum, was more over my left pec? So let's try getting that done. Well, that's just a 6.5 all of a sudden. So I accomplished what I was talking about. And then if you work on this, not being anywhere but toward the target, you should still be in a straight line. So I talked to some content creators on one of the major channels one time, and I said, look, you can play the left, the center, or the right side of your body. And they responded, we have measured everything. You can only play the right hand side of the body, period. At the end of discussion, I put a fork in it. And I was like, you kidding me? I'm even thinking you really play the center, and anything that goes past the center is what we call overrun. And then when you're coming down with your hand speed, it's going to have to, by the time you get to impact, catch back up to the center. And then you, by the time you're here, when you're released completely, now you're for sure at the center. So if you go past the center, your hands are kind of pinned, and I have you turning these hips. Now you just have to turn the hips even further if you're past the center. Well, short club's no big deal. What happens if we get to 2 irons? So now you're saying go past the center, get on the right, come all the way around, and I didn't get a clean hit. So I'd rather have y'all stay at the center. I want y'all to be able to hit these things. I told you the more you hit in the center, the better your ball flight. You start towing it like that last one, or start hitting the hosel, you're back to swinging as hard as you can. I mean, what's the point? So if you can come and make that nice snappy sound and hit straight and hit your 2 iron right where you want it, you're going to be better off. So here's that ladies 5, which I told you is more like my 6.5, but it's a nice light club. And I told you, man, this thing's got some flex to it. So what happens if we put it a little far forward? We're keeping, when we turn, we're keeping our hand literally by our left side. And so you can start coming in, and that just smashes. But it flew like my 6.5. So if you're having a bad day and your body's not cooperating, and you're finding you're getting too far back here, and you feel like you're getting trapped, and you're really having to turn back to the club, to the ball, before you can make that release, and you're getting thin shots like that, maybe it's time for a while to finish that round so you don't ruin it, is to go ahead and get more on the left side and stay on the left side and hit. So now I'm going to talk about one other thing. And this will hopefully finish our talks about dumping these angles. I said there's a way to hit the ball just fine without having too much of an angle here. Because you're really coming, if you're doing this swing right, and you're coming through and you're making that turn, you're really coming through at a pretty good plane. I said the last thing I want to see though is you get the hands too far out, and now you're dragging that handle through, and so now you're having to turn and try to release when you're dragging that handle, which is what people normally do who are trying to get more shaft lean and de-lofting that club. That's not a smooth swing. But the flip side of that question is, let's think about it. If your club is basically close to where the lie angle is, and you're just moving the shaft forward, you can do that without it necessarily opening up. I don't know why they always say, oh, if you take the shaft angle and you lean it forward, it opens up somehow automatically. No, it can stay square, and I can move this thing around 10 or 12 degrees, and if this guy knows what he's doing his job, I can move that 10 or 12 degrees, and really that's all the shaft angle you need to de-loft the club. So does moving this down help any? And there are people out there, even if you're conventional neutral grip, who think your toe, even if its lie angle is designed to lay flat, they believe the toe should be a hair off the ground. Well, that puts you a little bit more down to here, for example, where you're now got those hands, like I said, right above your toe line. So is there a difference on leverage? If your hands are here, you're going to have your left arm tighter here to keep this down. So when you bend that elbow and you're trying to hold this lag, all of a sudden, and you're making this turn where you're just turning into the ball, you're going to have to get a little bit more shaft lean. But at least I don't have it so that you're trying to drive that elbow past your side like some of these videos will say, because you can see that opens up the club face unless you start twisting that wrist, and then you're really having to knuckle down. So if you want to hit like this and still have some release coming in and get that elbow forward, that gets a little tough. But I'm saying whether you're here, if you go too far, you're going to get toey. If you go too low, you're going to get heely. So you kind of want to be at the lie angle. Well, that means you're not quite at this 45. If you watch, here's my 45, but if I'm at my proper lie angle and I turn my shoulders aren't at that 45. I'm not coming all the way down to come around and hit. But do I get more power if I do that? And here's what, after hitting a bunch of balls before I shot this video, here's what I learned that works for me and doesn't work for me. If I try to get further down here and get more angle, I can do it. And it comes in clean and it bites the ground pretty good. And I think it bites the ground pretty good because I'm closer to the hosel and I'm coming in on it instead of a typical lie angle, which might disperse things better across the sole. But it works. I feel like I can get more power, but I get a little bit more flippy if I'm not careful. So if I want to hold this, I got to really make sure I'm not coming over, because that's so much easier to do versus even there, you can see I'm coming over, or I might get flippier because I got more angle built into here. On the flip side, if I get a little bit lazier and I stand a little taller, sometimes I'm not coming in quite as clean. It's a straight shot, but that didn't have the power and the crispness I was looking for. So that's when you have to start working on your tempo. And you can see I've missed 2 in a row, but that's because was just practicing being down. So I guess what I'm basically saying is, if you stay on the plane and start hitting, you're going to hit fine. I don't think at first, for most of y'all, I don't think it's going to matter if you're on your lie angle or if you're a little further down. If you're on your lie angle and you don't feel like your hands are right in front of your toe line and you want to start working on all your clubs being the same so that you can get that going, you can do it. But I think it's going to be a preferential thing. It's what you prefer. For some of you guys, you're not going to want to get all the way down here and get that side lean. So then you don't need that club to be so tight to the body coming around, but I can see how you can pick up some speed versus standing a little taller and coming through. If you think you're starting to drag the handle, like you're really kind of dragging that handle through there, and you don't have a whole lot of release here because you're standing so tall up, you need to probably get down and you'll have more leverage. If, however, you feel like you're hitting the ball fine and you don't care about maybe an extra, I don't know, let's call it 3 to 4 yards. Let's say if you move down here and you learn how to set that up, that little extra leverage here versus here gives you 3 to 4 yards. It's tempted. I'd rather see you play with that than to start playing with trying to get as much shaft lean as possible. I'd rather see you, if you want a little bit more shaft lean, to go ahead and set up regular and then move the foot out once so that it promotes that coming through and getting a little bit further down because you have more space to move into. So I think that's where I'm going to kind of end the angles, how to dump these angles. I think for most of y'all, if you're staying pretty well on the plane and coming through, I think you have left shoulder, right shoulder. I think you have enough angle of attack. I have something that can measure all this, but it's so hot keeping these electronics out here in this heat. I just haven't wanted to. Be honest, I'm lazy. I don't want to. If it was winter time, I could do it. But if you come in and you feel like you're heavy here and you're fat, then you might want to go ahead and lower that handle a little bit. And then I can see when you come through, you're not as fat. I'll give you that. It does make a difference. But like I said, you're gonna have to play with it. But I'll finish with this. Now that I feel like I've concluded how to swing with these irons using this lead left, I will say this, when we go to wedges, and so with wedges, we have these much shorter shafts. I am going to have you, with your wedge work, stay very close to the body. The more that you can come in and hit your wedges there, like that's a typical wedge, but now you want to de-loft the wedge, and so you want to keep it in and hit smaller. Instead of going way up, I came way down. It's easier to de-loft on what we call basically a draw shot. If you were to draw the ball coming in, it's easier to de-loft it than it is to do a cut shot. Just the nature of the beast. When you're doing a cut shot, you're opening the face up a little bit more and they're going to go higher. If you're doing a draw, they're going to stay lower because you're coming down from inside out and you can keep them lower. When I do my wedge work, I pretty well keep everything. I'm not one of these people who tries to keep the club straight back and all that. If I'm going to hit wedge work, I'd much rather come in tight from the body because it's consistent. Remember, we've already gone through open door, shut door, or open door, closed door. Remember this drill? Open door, closed door? Well, what are you doing? You're coming from here. So if I'm adding in a little bit of turn and telling you to stay close to the body, and I said this keeps your hand straight, it makes chipping and pitching really easy. But we'll get into that. But as far as the lie angle is concerned, you are going to have to kind of play with your swing to determine what you think is working best. And as long as you're not dragging the handle through, I think you're going to be fine. If you need that extra bit of leverage and push that handle down a little bit and tighten it in to the body, I think you can do it. Just don't come out wide on your backswing. Let me get a 7-iron. If you're going to do it, if you want your handle down here, start moving this and stay tight throughout the whole swing. And then yes, you got a lot of leverage coming in. But if you stand a little taller, like I said, you might not quite have the same leverage, but you got all this weight coming through. So that's a good thing. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I get that. So watch how you come through, and from where you come through, the key is to get square. So if you can just at least go back to your contact drills, open door, shut door, open door, shut door, I think you're gonna be okay. I think you'll figure out where your leverage needs to be. And then if you want the extra distance, tuck that arm in further. The only problem I was saying, if you come out wide, where this is pretty straight, and then you come in tight, just make sure that you're not driving that toe into just half the ball because you came out wide and you came in tight, and then you start doing what looks like a slice shot going into the right, because you're basically bringing that toe too close to your body because you went wide and then you came in tight because you wanted this leverage. So if you're gonna work with it, work with it. If you're not gonna worry about it, don't, just get some angle here, stay on plane, and just lead left, lead right, and you're gonna do just fine.